Hi, everybody. Today we have a very special guest. I'll kick things off by introducing myself. My name is Noose of Polygon Health, which is a new mobile app in the app stores that really helps you access all of your health records in minutes to have better health care and other opportunities to connect you to researchers. And the purpose of this podcast is really to tell the stories of chronic condition patients to help other patients manage and benefit from hearing the patient stories, and particularly around CAR T treatments, and just overall to be helpful to the communities we serve. And multiple myeloma is a very important community, a warrior community, as many call themselves within the community. So, with that introduction, I'll hand it over to our very special guest, Ismael Murillo, to introduce himself and maybe give some background about himself and his family. Ismael.
Absolutely. News, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. My name's Ismael Murillo. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. Happily married, father of three. Prior military, I served in the military for 11 years. Currently work for Amazon. And now I can say I'm in remission with the multiple myeloma, which I was diagnosed with at the beginning of 2020.
Thank you for that. And I know you're a father of three, and you're in Arizona, as you said. So there's a lot here, and we will unpack it. But maybe you can talk a little bit about life before the diagnosis of multiple myeloma, and then talking about your first diagnosis of multiple myeloma and what was going through your mind and your family's mind and the conversations happening. So maybe giving some insight into who you were before multiple myeloma, and just yourself as a person, and then as multiple myeloma began.
Absolutely. So before multiple myeloma, I was working heavily with Amazon. I was running my own department called Central Operations. I oversaw the delivery component aspects of North America for Amazon, getting customers their packages and designing new programs and systems to ease that burden and create a better experience for our customers. Outside of Amazon, I was very involved with our three children. My oldest now is 19. He'll be 20 here in a few months. That's kind of scary to say. My middle child right now is 17 and my baby is 5 years old. But at the time, they're a little bit smaller, working through school, staying involved in their activities in and outside of school, spending time with my wife, trying to plan trips and vacations, just trying to enjoy the family time and the small things. But I was very career oriented at the time, trying to move up the mountain side, you could sort of say, just try and work towards the next promotion and whatnot. What led to my diagnosis, if you heard me say during my introduction, I was in the military. I was medically retired and I suffered many near catastrophic injuries along the way. And so I had multiple neck and back injuries, and I started having back pain around August and September of 2019. And it wasn't my normal back pain. So I went to my primary care physician and he's like, well, we need to, before we can do anything further, you need to go physical therapy before we can do imaging. I'm like, okay, perfectly understand that. So I did the physical therapy aspect and I went back to him towards the end of September. I'm like, hey, physical therapy isn't working. I'm still having chronic back pain. It's not the typical back pain I'm used to having. So he did an x-ray and the x-ray showed nothing. And I came back to him at the beginning of October. I'm like, look, this is still ongoing. This is still very painful. It's impacting my daily life functions, both at home and at work. Can we do something further? Like, can we do an MRI, or is any other thing we could look into as far as therapies or alternatives for treatment? He's like, okay, well, you did this already. You satisfied the needs for insurance. Let's go ahead and do an MRI. Like, perfect. So I did the MRI. And I remember the day was October 28th. I was at work at Amazon and I get a call from my primary care doctor. And it was he's like, hey, where are you at right now? I'm like, I'm at work right now, doctor. He's like, are you in a position where you could go somewhere in a closed or private or semi-private environment? Absolutely. So I stepped inside one of our offices, closed the door. It's like, hey, I got back the results of your MRI, and we found a mass on your eighth rib and spine. I'm like, whoa, kind of shook me for a second because I usually consider myself pretty active and decent shape because of my time in the military and having three kids. You have to stay active to chase after them. And I asked him, what do I do next? He's like, you need to go and see a specialist to identify what this mass is and if it's cancerous or benign or whatever the issue may be. We'll put a referral in and we'll get you taken care of. My wife helped me coordinate and handle a lot of that, and she was amazing. Got me an appointment set up like the first week of November, and they're originally thinking it was a sarcoma, like a type of bone cancer. And when they did the biopsy, it came back as a myeloma, and they switched me at Mayo Clinic to the hematology oncology department under Dr. Keith Stewart, who performed another biopsy to determine what type of myeloma is this? Is this MGUS? Is this smoldering myeloma? Or is it multiple myeloma? And when we got back the test results in from the bone marrow biopsy from Rochester, it came back as multiple myeloma. It was, the myeloma cells were in excess of greater 30% or more in my bone marrow. And he's like, look, we're going to be aggressive in your treatment. So I just want to let you be aware of that because of your age, because we caught this at the early stages, we feel we can be very aggressive and nip this in the bud right away and work towards that remission goal for you.
Got it. And what was the reaction sort of like within the family as this was all unfolding?
We were kind of numb, to be quite honest. It was like more like shock type of thing. And for me, I was like really angry. Like, where did this come from? What was the root cause? Is this something genetic? I had no idea what myeloma is or was. And we were still coming off of losing my wife's brother from a year prior to that, and then losing our sister-in-law to osteosarcoma a couple years right before that. So like we were just kind of really caught off guard. It was one of those things like we didn't expect it to happen to us. And we just kind of hunkered down once we got the treatment plan and went to those appointments, didn't really let it marinate. Like, okay, like here's what we need to do. Let's knock it out the park. Let's focus on treatment. Let's try to stay positive as possible and just push forward. My wife has been with me at pretty much every single appointment with me. If I don't ask a question, I can count on her to ask a question I'm going to miss, and vice versa. She's been an incredible pillar of support to ask those little nuances that I may forget to ask, but she'll remember to do that, and vice versa. If she forgets something to ask, I'll be right there to remember to ask the questions she may forget to ask. So we've been a really great support for each other working through this, and just trying to stay positive as much as possible. And having her by my side for the whole experience has been incredible.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a family and team effort really to work through this together. And it's really great to hear that you guys, after receiving the initial shock, going into an action plan with your care team, with your family, that's all very heartening to hear that. So, since we're a health data company, Polygon Health, we want to really understand the medication journey that you took with your care team and sort of what worked and what didn't work. And, we know you got to the CAR T, but what was, life between diagnosis up to CAR T? What were the successes and challenges along the way?
Absolutely. So the first treatment plan they put me on, some of the medications I started on initially was daratumumab, carfilzomab, dexamethasone, and Revlimid. Three of those medications you receive via infusion. Revlimid is an oral chemo medication you'll take daily. For myself, I'll be on 21 days and off 7 days with Revlimid. And that was the initial proposed treatment plan. And at the time, Dr. Keith Stewart at Mayo Clinic and his fellow Dr. Gonzalez informed me, like, this is the best treatment plan right out the gate for newly diagnosed multiple myeloma. This is also the most aggressive form we can do right now. So we're going to go ahead and get you started on that. On top of doing radiation for the mass they found on my eighth ribbon spine that they told me was a plasmacytoma, I was supposed to do 10 treatments of radiation for that as well. I never had a chance to finish radiation. I made it 5 sessions in, and I made it around a few rounds in for the initial treatment plan. Right at the beginning of January 2020, when I started this, if you recall, COVID was just starting to become a conversation nationally. It was already being talked about on a global level, but it was just now starting to become a national concern for us. And I contracted COVID right at the same time I started treatment. January 27th of 2020 was the last round of treatment I did on this proposed treatment plan before I was admitted to the ICU, where I suffered multiple organ failures, received 6 blood transfusions, and I was placed in a medical induced coma. The biggest thing I remember out of this time was being at the hospital, having 2 orderlies on my left and right holding my arms as they're giving me the medication to place me in the induced coma, was them telling my wife to bring the children by to say their goodbyes because they didn't think I would make it. I woke up around on February 11th when I was placed in the coma January 27th, and I bounced back as quick as I went down with no lingering side effects. I took about a month off of treatment before they started me on the next round of treatment. So I started treatment again based off of Dr. Stewart and Dr. Gonzalez's recommendation, was daratumumab, dexamethasone, Revlimid with Velcade, because initially there was no test available to test for COVID at the time, so they didn't rule it out. They just weren't sure. They initially thought it was an allergic reaction to carfilzomab, but when we did the antibody test later in March, I tested positive for the COVID antibodies. I stayed on this treatment plan for Dex, Dara, Revlimid, and Velcade until August of 2020 to get me prepped, try and get my numbers low enough. And by numbers, I mean low enough, I'm talking about is the M spike number, the multiple myeloma protein number, and see how low they could get my light chains, my kappa, my lambda, the FLC ratio low enough to prep me for a stem cell transplant. And the reason why that's important is the lower that the M spike is, the lower that those light chains are, theoretically, you're going to have a better response for the stem cell transplant. So when we hit our 100-day mark after August from the stem cell transplant, we performed another bone marrow biopsy to see how successful the stem cell transplant was. And there's 3 responses you could have. You could have no response, a partial response, or a complete response. I obviously didn't have a full response, and I obviously didn't have no response. I had what's called a partial response. So I still had what they called an MRD, or minimal residual disease, in my bone marrow for the myeloma at the time. And if I remember, if I'm looking back at my charts right here, it would, from when we started, the numbers were greatly reduced, but wasn't the response that we were seeking and looking for. If I look right here at my MRD numbers, I had maybe a response. My initial MRD number was 871, and that was cut in half to about 450. And so that led to the next conversation to Dr. Stewart and Dr. Gonzalez before Dr. Stewart left. Okay, so we had a partial response. What does treatment look like now? It's like, well, we can't keep you on Velcade for too long because prolonged use will cause neuropathy and other health effects. So we're going to remove that medication out. You elicited a great response so far to Dara, Dex, and Revlimid. So we're going to continue with that treatment plan and monitor you through routine labs, electrophoresis to measure your light change, your M spike, and then we're also going to do a bone marrow biopsy every 6 months to measure the minimal residual disease, or MRD numbers, and ensure that the numbers are trending the right direction. And if anything changes, we'll have that conversation if we need to adjust your treatment plan. And so we continued down that path for quite a while. My next bone marrow biopsy, they pushed me out almost a year, was November of 2021. And my MRD number was all the way down to 58, which is a huge
Wow.
reduction compared to where I was initially at age 71. I'm like, okay, great. The kappa and light chains were also trending the right direction from when I initially started. If you look back at the charts I provided back in February 6th of 2020, my kappa light chain was 8.92, my lambda free light chain was 1.0,
Yeah.
and my FLC ratio for kappa and lambda was 8.83. And we take that back into the following year, and we'll look at March for the labs that was provided. We're at 0.19 for the kappa, we're at 0.11 for the free light chain, and we're at a 1.71 for the kappa lambda FLC ratio. So we can visually see this through these markers that treatment is working and we're trending the right way, which is fantastic.
What did they attribute most of that decline in MRD to? Was it the stem cell, or was it truly just a combination?
They said it was a combination of things. One, because I was my age, I was active and healthy prior to this, staying active when I can, eating the right things, just asking questions to my care team. What else can I do at home to help influence a better result? So they had me speak to nutritionists and pulmonary experts and giving me feedback and advice as what I could do from home to elicit a better response to treatment as well. And but the biggest influencer that said it was my age and my lifestyle prior to this, because I don't smoke, I don't drink, I never partake in those things prior to this. So they say it was a combination of things, but as I said, my age and my lifestyle prior to this played a big role. They mentioned as well.
Got it. And being in your 40s, right? I mean, you're certainly on the younger side of those with multiple myeloma. So how did you, given that's the case, it's very rare, or less common that folks in their 40s get multiple myeloma. How did you connect with others in the community? And we'll get back to the medication part, but just thinking about the age factor, including lifestyle and, other things you mentioned there. Being so young, how were you able to piece all this together, and others can benefit from understanding how you did it?
It was quite daunting at first because I wasn't familiar with the cancer and really familiar with the resources available to me when I was diagnosed. So it was very daunting and overwhelming. The fellow who I was working with, Dr. Gonzalez, informed me of an organization called Health Tree. And going through Health Tree and looking through the social media accounts through Instagram and Facebook, I found other groups and other individuals such as myself through Instagram who are close to my age, some individuals younger than my age, and going through their content, watching their videos, reading their posts and their struggles helped me realize I'm not the only person going through this, and it encouraged me to seek more resources and share that information as much as I can, because I obviously am not the only person going through this. And how can I help those others who are coming after me, who are also just being newly diagnosed themselves, and what questions they're going to have? And I remember being in that position when I was diagnosed, like, what resources are there? Is there any financial groups? Is there any groups I could partake on virtually through support groups through Zoom or Microsoft meetings and whatnot, and just making that information as available as I can and publishing that, and then just participating in Facebook communities and talking to other people who are going through the same thing as I am, or getting information for caregivers for my wife to let her know there's information out there as well too, or tips or techniques to cope with it or to manage symptoms, or just general mental health awareness as well too. So
Right.
there's a large community out there, as you mentioned, they call themselves multiple myeloma warriors, and using those key hashtags help me find these groups and get connected with them and initiate the, you could say, the initial reach out to them and just introduce yourself and start asking questions.
That's right. And I understand that you downloaded a lot of your medical data and you got, reams and reams of, physical papers as well. So,
Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
and Polygon Health can, digitize all of that and would have saved you had it been around earlier in your journey.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
but maybe
If I
you
would
can
have found you a couple years ago.
exactly. Well, we're just launched this year. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that data collection and how you handled that.
No, absolutely. I may being in the military and being a type A person I am and type of work I do, I always make it best practice to download stuff all the time and to make backups. Some of that data I download on a routine basis is my medical data. Fortunately, Mayo Clinic makes access to that data easy for me. So I go down and I select a time frame, let's say from January 2020 to April 2020. I'll download my medical records from that standpoint. And those medical records will include office visits, test results, imaging, and files attached to that. And I'll zip drive that and encrypt it. And then I'll do it again 4 months later. So from April, so it'll go May, June, July, August, I'll download again. I'll do the same thing. And I kind of had to be the steward of my own data because when I would be having conversations with my primary care physician, they weren't having access to that information. But me having that backup copy, it was easy for me to present that information to them so they could catch up on my treatment and care. Because I'm a military veteran, I also had to make that information available to the VA, and they didn't have access to Mayo Clinic systems. So it's kind of the same thing. I had to be the steward of my own medical data.
Mm.
I present that information to them, and so they have access to that. That's important on many different fronts. From a PCP side of things, their job is to make sure I'm receiving the proper care. If there's anything else he could kind of filter in that I may not be receiving to ensure I'm having a good quality of life. If there's any side effects or symptoms I'm experiencing, we can have those conversations where you can filter in. From the military VA side of things, it was good to know because the environmental exposures, everything I had, the VA assumed responsibilities, but they needed access to my treatment care and plan. So if
Yeah.
anything were to happen through my own private insurance, the VA will have up-to-date records of what care I've been receiving. If they need to intervene to assume responsibility for my care, they're up to date on what care I was receiving, what that looked like, what that frequency was, and if there's anything else that they need to know that may be impacting me and my quality of life, they can step in and assist me as well. But all of that wouldn't be possible if I didn't stay proactive and download these records on a routine basis.
Excellent. And it sounded like your conversations with your care team were a lot different with you being informed versus, not having access to that data. Is that right?
Absolutely. I've been a data person without knowing it my whole entire life. And it's been good practices to keep records and archives of everything just to make those conversations easier when they do come up.
Excellent. That's right. And Polygon streamlines all of that, including all that you mentioned, the imaging, the pathology reports, and a lot more. So link is above. So back to the story on the MRD side, right? So in March 2022 and sorry, 20 well, sorry, it is 2022. And then in August, you had that dip and then it started to rise again. Maybe you want to talk about that rise and then ultimately the introduction of CAR T.
And absolutely. So if we look at March of 2022, my MRD numbers was the lowest there were at the time, which was 21. And I was really excited. At the time, Jeremy Larson was still my oncologist with the fellow Dr. Gonzalez. And we're asking him, like, okay, perfect. We're trending in the right direction. Is there anything else I could do additionally at home to help reduce this number to influence it in a positive way? Like, no, just keep doing what you're doing. And then August of 2022, when we rechecked the bone marrow biopsy for the MRD number again, we creeped up. We're at 50. And I was a little I'll be honest, I was a little upset. It's perfectly normal feeling. I was like, okay, what happened here? Did anything change in the quality of medication I received, which was Dara, dexamethasone, and Revlimid? And around this time, I should also indicate I start having severe hip pain and bone pain in my hips. And we did an MRI, and it was also found I was suffering from avascular necrosis, which is bone death or decay from prolonged use of being on dexamethasone for a great amount of time, which is caused by steroids, in this case, the dexamethasone. He's like, no, we're gonna stand pat. We're gonna push through this. Maybe we'll adjust your frequency in your treatment plan. We'll lower the dose of dexamethasone to try to reduce the risk of avascular necrosis from spreading. But we've seen that this treatment plan has worked because we got your MRD down to 21 at one point. Theoretically, if we change the frequency instead of twice or once every 2 weeks and make it once a week, we should see those results and the MRD come back down. And like perfect. And at this time, Dr. Larson accepted a role somewhere else, and Dr. Chopper stepped in, and I was assigned a new fellow, Dr. Kuzni, and they had the same thoughts and agreed with the previous treatment plan. So we pushed on. And so Dr. Chopra wanted to repeat the MRD in December of 2020 or 2022, and the MRD number creeped up to 164. And he was growing concerned. I'm like, this shouldn't be happening. You're diagnosed with typical risk for multiple myeloma, not the aggressive form. So let's repeat this here in a couple months. We're also going to change your treatment plan from the Dex, Dara, and Revlimid, and we're going to change to Dex, Dara, and Pomalyst instead. And we're going to repeat the bone marrow biopsy in a few months in March of 2023. I'm like, perfect. So when we repeated the bone marrow biopsy again, the MRD numbers came back up to 217. And it was because of these these test results from the bone marrow biopsy for the MRD that Dr. Chopper introduced a conversation of CAR T and what that means to me. And I heard of CAR T. I didn't read too much into it at the time. So I took this opportunity to ask as many questions as possible. What is CAR T? What does it mean to me? What are the side effects? How does this impact my quality of life? All those important questions anyone should be asking. Like what's long-term effects? What's the short-term side effects and whatnot? And he described it as in the sense of like it's kind of like a stem cell transplant, except we're not targeting your stem cells. We're targeting your T cells. We're going to extract your T cells and we're going to reprogram them to target the myeloma cells once they're conditioned, and we give them back to you. And when that happens, you'll be in the hospital for about 30 days, monitored, watching for those side effects such as neurotoxicity, cytokine release syndrome. And we want to monitor you because when those side effects happen, we could give you the appropriate treatment to counteract those side effects and to encourage positive response to the treatment to get the best results possible.
Got it. And was there a reason why you went with one type of CAR T versus the other?
That was more provider influence than it was my own influence. Dr. Chopra had worked with both Abecma and CARVYKT, and he said he's seen better results elicited through CARVYKT. He's seen his patients who on CARVYKT have less side effects, or they did have side effects that weren't as severe as Abecma. And then the other part he spoke to me about was the quality of the T cells when they give them back. There's a certain threshold that the T cells, once they're conditioned, they have to meet. And he had better experience with CARVYKT meeting that threshold and meeting the timelines for his patients.
Got it. And then it just looks like you had an amazing remission to the point where your MRD was zero. So maybe just a little color around that.
No, absolutely. So we redid the bone marrow biopsy July and we got the results in August. And I seen the test results and the lab workups coming in before then. I'm like, okay, this is looking good, but I was kind of holding my breath, waiting for those clonoSEC results to come in for the MRD results, and they came back as 0, which was tremendous because it's taken us over 3.5 years to get to this point.
Wow. Yeah. Very, very emotional. And congratulations. And how are you guys trying to, maintain the result and sort of steps that you're trying to keep on your plan at this point?
Right now, so I'm approaching my day 100, so we're still early. That's coming up here soon. I have my next appointment with my care team September 29th, but as of right now, from the conversations I have had, they said consider myself in full remission, stay as active as possible, uh, take care of myself, obviously, eat well, exercise. Diet, exercise are critical components in a healthy life, and especially regarding myeloma and treatment and that sense. But they said right now, once we get to that day 100, repeat the lab results all over again, check my lab work again for my immunizations and repeat any of those if necessary, but go have fun.
Excellent.
Just enjoy the time with family, resume any normal activities I was doing prior to diagnosis.
Excellent success story. And, all the warriors would like to achieve a similar result, and that's the hope. Are there, and hopefully they benefit from your story. What are some mistakes along the way that folks can look out for, and maybe things that you could have done differently in managing the condition? And, were there any particular moments that were inflection points in your mind where, as a result of something you did or reactions to particular developments that led you to do, or your team to do, certain things that are just sort of best practice or maybe unique to your situation? Maybe you can give some reflection back on your journey and things you could have done better, or things to look out for.
Absolutely. One thing I was told constantly throughout this whole process was it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Take your time, and nothing's going to work instantly. It's a process to get to that finish line. So learn to pace yourself, learn to rest when you can, listen to your body when you're tired, listen to your caregiver, listen to your care team. Don't rush anything because nothing's going to happen overnight. And being who I am and being in the military and stuff like that, I could be very impatient sometimes, and just learning to go with the flow sometimes and let the process work and do its job is something that will take a lot of stress from anyone, because dealing with this disease, dealing with treatment, it's very tiring and it takes a lot of time away from your family, yourself, and you just have to learn. I don't want to say you have to learn to accept it, but you have to learn how to cope and manage with it in a healthy way. And don't push those around you away either, because they're there trying to help you with it as well. As far as key takeaways, asking questions, learning to advocate for yourself, letting your caregiver advocate for you as well is something that's critical. Just because your team is telling you this, it may not be the correct answer. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to push back. It's okay to seek second opinions if you have that opportunity, just to make sure that they're keeping you at the forefront of that conversation and making sure that the treatment plan they're proposing, those conversations they're having with you, are going to elicit the best possible result while maintaining the possible outcome for best quality of life on top of that. So if you have the opportunity to seek that second opinion, it doesn't hurt. If you have that opportunity to ask those questions, please do. Staying active in social media through Instagram, Facebook is key as well, because sometimes you may come across something you didn't think to ask, and you could ask that to your provider. It may make or break your care team or your care plan. We don't know, but it may be something that may have been overlooked, and it's something that may be worth diving into and having additional conversations on. If not, you're just educating yourself and making yourself more aware of the type of disease you're fighting and having more information to make yourself better capable of managing it and going through the possible outcomes and results that could arise from it. So staying active and informed, asking those questions are key. And the best thing I could say on top of that is just maintaining a healthy outlook in on everything. Just try and stay upbeat, because staying negative, throwing your hands up in the air, saying I want to quit, is not going to accomplish anything. Uh, Being depressed about it, it's going to have negative impacts. So you have to find ways to maintain your positivity. Look for those little wins, and those little nuances are going to have a positive impact on your quality of care as you're going through this challenging journey. Will have a good outlook for you as well too. That's really the best way I could put it right there. Examples is I went back to school through treatment, and I decided I need to learn a new skill sets I could provide for my family while still trying to maintain a career. I got my master's degree while on treatment with a 4.0 GPA. That was a win. It was also a good distraction on top of that, so I didn't focus on the negative aspects of this. Or another one was my daughter starting preschool last year, and it was a positive distraction to focus on her and her accomplishments and what she's working towards as she starts her academic journey. And then my son's on top of that in high school and graduating high school. So just find those positive little distractions through your journey to focus on, to distract yourself from the negative, will have tremendous impacts, and not only on yourself spiritually, emotionally, but on how you're feeling overall as well too.
Very, very wise and very helpful, Ismail, in terms of, you're uh, turning that distraction into a real positive for you and the family with your degree and the family accomplishments. So I want to underscore that as well. In terms of any additional communities that you want to plug, I know you mentioned Health Tree. I think there was also an Instagram group, or any other specific groups that people can look into.
There's a couple. If you go to Facebook, there's a CAR-T group I stay active on, and they led to me asking additional questions for my care team. So one thing I haven't discussed was through my labs, even though I'm MRD negative, I'm still registering an M spike. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why is it my MRD is negative? Why do I have a M spike still? It's like 0.2.
Mm.
Come to find out, it's something normal. You can have an M spike for up to 6 months. Up to, I had one individual posted that had a positive M spike up to almost over a year. And it's just a half-life of the myeloma protein in your plasma, and it goes away. And it was nothing for them to really worry about. I had the same conversation with my provider over the phone. It's like the big takeaway here is that your MRD is negative. That M spike over time is going to go down. That's nothing to worry about. Don't get yourself worked up. If it was something important, we would have reached out to you, had those conversations with you. You're at a great place right now. The key takeaway is that MRD, the minimal residual disease, is at 0. Where you started your journey, you're over 800 back in November of 2019. So that's your huge win right now, is that you're MRD negative finally. The M spike is going to go away. Your light chains look incredible, the lowest we've seen them since you've been on any form of treatment. And my last light chains were 0.06, 0.13, and then my FLC ratio for my lambda and kappa was unmeasurable, which is, for me, where I started from to where I'm at, is incredible. But being part of these groups, like like if you look at Facebook and type in CAR-T support groups, we
We'll add
have
the link up top for the CAR-T group in specific. And was there another Facebook group, or just the CAR-T one?
this is a CAR-T one for right now. There's my myeloma groups I'm a part of. There's maybe about a easy half dozen I'm in. There's caregiver support groups as well too that my wife's a part of as well.
Excellent.
You could look through Facebook, and I can provide separate links for you as well at the end of
Yep.
this podcast. You
We'll
can
add
share
them
this
in.
with the community.
Yes.
But being part of those groups and realizing you're not the only one going through this, as bad as it sounds, provides a sense of relief because it's normal. Everyone's gone through this. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. You'll get to that point where you need to get to be in remission.
Excellent. Excellent. And there was one Instagram group as well, right?
There's what I call influencers. So there's not really groups on Instagram. There's individuals who have large followings, and connecting with them, they have large amounts of resources, and they may be connected to other organizations such as Health Tree. They may be part of Mayo Clinic. They could be part of Princess Margaret Center in Canada, who all provide excellent amount of resources and information, such as what is CAR T, what are light chains, what are M-spike proteins, and to provide little snippets or videos or pictures in the form of a PowerPoint that walk you through that process, that provides a very high level to a very in-depth look into what these are to help inform yourself as a patient or a caregiver on what's being discussed.
Excellent. And so we will add in the links that you send our way, Ismael, for the viewers. And just as we wrap here, the key words when I think about your story, are resilience and grit. You're very optimistic and work for your family and future. And there was an article that I read, which we'll link in the description. But I remember this quote, and it was, things are going to happen, but how are you going to push forward? And it's just such an insightful question to be asking ourselves when we're faced with any challenge, much less multiple myeloma, but just to be proactive and hopeful. What do you think fuels that type of mindset, and what steps can others take to think that way as well?
That's a great question, News. And one thing that's helped me, I learned at a young age, is find your why, find your motivation. For each person, that's different. And that's a question I can't answer for anyone else but myself. So for me to be so resilient and push through all this adversity, it was find my why. Why do I still want to be here? Why do I want to be successful? Why do I want to be multiple myeloma? And that's my family. So they're my why. So what kind of example am I setting for them if I just throw my hands up in there and quit and cry it's the end of the world? And I'm not teaching them those values and standards I always lived up to myself. So I'm like, no, I'm going to push through this. I'm going to beat this. I don't care how many rounds of chemo I need to push through. I don't care how many rounds of radiation I need to go through, or how many different treatment plans I need to overcome. I'm going to accomplish that and go at any means necessary. And I'm still going to do it with a smile on my face at the end of the day.
Wow, you're making me smile, and I can see how that's emotional as you reflect back. But that is the right message, that you got to find your why and push forward. So Ismael, with that, how can people reach out and connect with you and stay in touch if this story resonated, and people want to reach out to you and benefit from your connection with them? Please let the people know how they can contact you.
Absolutely. There's a couple of different ways anyone can reach out to me. You can reach out to me through Facebook. You could network and connect with me on LinkedIn, or you could reach out and connect with me on Instagram. And anyone who messages me or has questions or anything like that, feel free to message me directly. I respond to everyone. If anyone has any additional questions or additional resources that may have used through my process, I'll be more than happy to share that with them on a one-on-one basis, on top of whatever else I may have posted on any one of my accounts as well too.
Thank you so much. We'll add in your socials that you mentioned for folks to click on. And just thank you so much for sharing your story, Ismael. I truly believe this is going to be a great help to the warrior community of multiple myeloma and the family and caregivers that support them. So just thank you for sharing your story with us and life after CAR T. And we appreciate it and hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, News.
You got it. And just to add on the research part, Polygon is recruiting as we speak for a multiple myeloma and CAR T study specifically. So for anybody who has taken CAR T, please reach out, research at polygonhealth.com. And we also have our socials up here, and you'll be able to connect with us there to participate and really advance medicine through giving back, in terms of data and the research in your story as well. We'd love to have you on this podcast as well. So that's another avenue to help the community.